Good morning. This is Dr. Long with the F104 mind map. This is organizational design in the following context of end-to-end force management, which begins with strategy, goes through requirements and JSIDs, the capability development through the CBA, to make recommendations with our DCR. Then those solutions, when approved, compete for resources. The solutions get documented into TONEs, compete for resources in TAA, where we approve authorizations which get documented in MTOs, then get integrated into divisions and units in the field where they are made ready for employment, and then we sustain them. So we're right in the middle of developing these organizational solutions as part of the .MLPF. So you recall, strategy leads to the Army plan, which has these 5 components, and I think of those as ends, ways, means, execution, and assessment. That gets expressed over the PPB&E. The current year is the execution year, the next year is the approved budget year, then 5 years of the program, which is a blueprint for spending, and then various plans of different time frames go out 7 to 25 years, and then things march to the left as they come into the program and then into budget and then into execution. So JSIDS is the requirements decision support system. It has a CBA, capabilities-based assessment, which is the analytical engine of JSIDS. The functional area assessment describes what's going on. Functional needs assessment defines the KPPs of those requirements. Functional solutions assessments then turn those into recommendations for action. The .MLPFP lens is how we characterize all of those, a systematic, disciplined, multi-purpose lens. Those material solutions that are approved get launched into DAS. In F103, we saw that to come up with the material solutions. The organizational solutions are going to get developed through the Force Design Update. That's today's lesson. All of these solutions come together into TONEs, and when they compete inside Total Army Analysis for resources, and then become authorizations managed throughout PPB&E. That's the next phase. But the whole management is PPB&E, in which we define all of those Title X functions, how and when and where and who's going to perform those. This end-to-end force management process consists of 2 major components: force development, which takes us from the strategy and the what we have to do all the way through the design and the approval of requirements. And then force integration, once we put resources on them and then make those forces ready. That's force integration. We have a lot of examples of those things in the different curriculum domains. The development of the Strikers was a way to get a medium weight deployable force that was heavier than light and lighter than heavy. The Light Division was a response to a need for getting combat power into a force projection environment much quicker, to put down a marker with the promise of heavies to come. Modularity was a response to redesign the Army from a division-based force into a BCT-based force as a response to op-tempo. So there are lots of both revolutionary and evolutionary force designs written large. We're moving back towards the days of Army of Excellence, in which the division is the centerpiece once more and is going to have something like a standardized organization with assigned brigades. We're seeing the DIVARTY, the DISCOM coming back to the old style to establish a stable division base. In leadership, changes in mission command versus command and control influence how those designs are performed and approved, consistent with how we're going to fight. We need leadership these days that is adaptable and can apply these force structures in an appropriate way, rather than trying to over-synchronize these carefully constructed complex organizations, although you could argue that's what we're heading back towards at the division level. Do we need leaders who are able to control these forces or to adapt to situations? It's like rehearsal versus response. Red teaming is a way for us to apply some cognitive discipline and critical thinking in a systematic way to ensure that the leadership that's making all of these decisions that I'm about to talk about are not operating in their own blind spot. The strategy of going back to large-scale ground combat operations as a priority now influences the kinds of organizations that we're going to develop. The division as a warfighting base unit is now driving the changes that we're seeing. We have to consider how operating in an analog environment or with space, cyber, and nano, and all of these things taken together are going to influence the warfighting strategy, which then drives all of these decisions that we're going to make on the organizational structures we have to have. Tactically, some capability gaps that we're going to have to solve are the div-cav problem. We don't have a dedicated unit at the division level to fight for information, to be the person on the ground to clear and control division deep fires so that he can shape for the brigades. So figuring out how to solve that's going to be a problem for us to work on. The FM30 directive to consolidate gains has brought about a response of the sustainment area command post as a way to maybe reestablish a division level command post that can synchronize and manage all of those division level operations in what used to be the rear. That went away during modularity because we felt information and decentralized brigade operations removed the requirement for that, but that's starting to creep back in. An environment that features area access or anti-access area denial now is shaping the kinds of requirements we need at the tactical level, which then drives the kinds of units that we're going to need. Under sustainment, the return of the DISCOM is a way to standardize, normalize, and improve the sustainment of standard divisions is on its way back. We'll see that when we get into Charlie 313 and the sustainment lessons. JLOTS is a response to the A2AD tactical environment in which we got to do joint logistics over the shore, and so now we need organizations that are capable of doing that at the joint and the service level. Reception, staging, onward movement, integration, and early entry all have sustainment implications. They are division and higher level operations, but we've got to do those things in order to build the force for the decisive phases. So those have sustainment implications, how you do that and how you get all that equipment and sustainment stocks into the theater. Medical service and CASEVAC have to be able to respond to the new demands of the increased casualty rates of LSGCO. So taking a look at how those forces are arrayed and their capacities, and our manning system, which is really not set up to respond to an LSGCO environment, now is an area of great concern. So we'll take a look at that in greater detail during our sustainment portions. So under force management, the establishment of Army Futures Command and the FCC as a way to expedite and improve the development of adaptable ready forces sooner in the design process combines with rapid acquisition materiel system changes. You see that manifested in the 8 cross-functional teams and the Big 6 modernization priorities. So this is a force management system response to try to more rapidly get these requirements fielded and ready in order to respond to the LSGCO changes. So those are some of the connections that we'll see looking forward. The modernization of these units is in the form of TOEs and MTOs. Remember, those are organizational documents. The base TO&E is that approved blueprint at the least modernized form, and then the objective TO&E is going to be the most modernized form, and we move up this stair step of increased capability through the use of basis of issue plans. These are logical groupings of people, equipment, time, money, and other resources that move you through TO&E and MTO changes up this stair step to the most modernized. It's the way we manage the fielding and integration of people and equipment packages. That's organized by DA 357, and then all of the personnel and equipment managers out there. So that's part of this whole document organizational process, where we go from unit reference sheets, which are design documents. Think of those as a cartoon sketch of that organization and how it is proposed that it operates in the battlefield. When approved through the FDU process, then it gets documented into a table of organization and equipment, which is a requirements document, a blueprint that describes how that model of a typical organization should be able to fight. Then after competing in TAA, those TO&Es become specific unit MTOs, modified table of organization and equipment, which is now an authorization document, a contract for readiness between DA and the unit commander, that if we give him those assets, time, money, space, and the opportunity to train, that he will turn that into a ready force that the GCC can employ in the theater. So the design of those organizations, conducted by the CDIDs and the force management proponents using that .mil-PF analysis, it's informed by resource constraints and supported by training development, material development, doctrine developers, all of whom manifest into the organizational designs that compete in the FDUs, and then gets expressed along with materiel solutions and organizational solutions to go become these TO&Es and MTOs in the future. Along the way, DA is going to conduct this force integration functional area ratings. So they're going to evaluate these Title 10 support processes and functions, each of which has a lead, each of which has, or most of them have, additional supporting staff elements to perform particular analyses to ensure that we can actually make the changes to field those organizations. And then as they're conducting this FIFA analysis, the amount of change that has to be undergoing during the program is judged by green, amber, red. So I get a minor reprogramming to ensure that we can get it done and adjust the program to account for the new organization and the requirements. Amber if I got to make moderate, red only if there's major reprogramming. So that really describes the categories of how much work has to be done in the program when the TAA makes an analytical decision, a recommendation, and the chief approves it. Then the PPB&E adjustments in all these areas becomes that FIFA analysis, and that's how we judge how much pain there's going to be in the reprogramming. So you can think of .mil-PF and FIFA as those systematic models. So the force management model simplified follows these paths where strategies get analyzed into the capabilities we need. So we design organizations and the models and compete for resources while the materiel acquisition adds its pieces. Once we've made those decisions, we make combat ready units out of the combination of personnel and materiel, and then that goes out to those combatant commanders in the form of ready units. That TAA process that we go through really has two big phases. We'll talk about that more in 105, but the capability demand analysis is the quantitative analytics of a broad range of scenarios, different priorities, time frames, combinations, different unit types, so that we can explore what is the best possible payoff of the money we spend on organizations to get the right force mix across all the compos to meet the nation's needs and to satisfy those scenario requirements. After that 1 to N list is recommended by the quantitative analysis, it goes through councils of colonels and general officer steering committees, a qualitative professional judgment that is the resourcing and approval phase. So we still incorporate the professional judgment to make the final decision. And that's supported by majors and higher that are working from proponents and major commands and DA staff and those direct reporting units and, that are really judging artfully this blend of different kind of units and to come up with combat power. So when we think about the 5 phases of Army force development, it goes through these phases with these purposes. We're developing the capabilities in JSIDs through that .mil-PFP analysis. We design those organizations and gain approval for requirements in the FDU. The development of organizational models is when we turn those URSs into TONEs at use of PHMSA by applying some management science to fully round out those detailed org models in the form of a TONE. It competes for TAA then, where we're determining affordability and supportability, and then the choices we make there are documented into organizational authorizations in MTOs by PHMSA, and that's where we get those readiness contracts. So along the way, you should be able to articulate, if asked, the roles of these players to work with the organizational developments. I'm not going to talk any further about those. I think I've already said those, but those would be, if you have questions on those, certainly bring those to class. The O&O concept accompanies that force design update URS. It really describes in words and pictures how that organizational design should operate on the battlefield. You're going to get to practice that with the worksheet that you're bringing to class in your F100 paper. The URS, the objective TONE, the modernization through the BOIPs, the way it goes from the base through the BOIPs to the objective, that's this glide path. MTOs, you should understand that that's the contract. FIFA is that force integration functional area analytical process by DA. It's going to support the divisions and ultimately help decide how we're going to field things down when you're in a battalion as the XO. Total Army Analysis is that the authorization analytical engine that makes us aware of what it is, the best trade-off and mix of forces. The R-Struct message documents that Total Army Analysis decision, becomes the Army Structure Method, which then gets expressed through the Program Objective Memorandum, and that's called the POM force that is managed throughout the program years. The force design update process I've talked about. TAA is important because I mentioned it twice apparently. So the basis of allocation and the workload capacity has to do with that organizational design. That the basis of allocation tells you that if you have this kind of a unit, this is how many of them that you are expected to get. So for every 18,500 soldiers in a deployed theater, you get one quartermaster non-divisional supply and services company to handle class 2, 4, 3P, 5, and 7. So that's a basis of allocation rule that allows you to build out the force structure to support the force that's up there above the line doing the work. So these basis of allocation rules, and there's over 3,500 of them that are considered in TAA, are things that we use to figure out what kind of support force we need to execute all of those divisions that are doing the fighting. That's the what you discover in TONEs and MTOs to figure out why you have them and then how much workload those things can do, like how many tons can a truck company non-divisional carry down the road by different classes of supply, and at what distance, and what do they rely on in order to have that work to be supported. So this combination of basis of allocation and workload capacity rules are what allow TAA to determine the best payoff of forces. And you find all that information in TONEs and MTOs, but it begins with that URS, and then the O&O concept describes basically what it is that organization we are proposing should be able to do. DOTML PFP is the lens. The mission essential wartime requirement is what we're trying to define in those TONEs. What do they absolutely have to be able to do for us to be able to fight and win? Manpower allocation rules expressed through the manpower requirements criteria, or the MARC standards, is how the management science at use of PHMSA, the Force Management Support Agency, takes those cartoon designs of the URS and turns that into a detailed blueprint of the unit at the TONE level, chapter and verse. That in order to perform those functions that are described in the URS, we're going to need 57 trucks, and if you get 57 trucks, there is a requirement for a certain number of mechanics, and then when you have a certain number of mechanics, that has to have standards of grade in order to ensure that we have the right rank structure to supervise all of those guys. So when you have that many trucks and that many people, you got to have that many cooks and a certain number of radios and an armor and weapons and all that. So the manpower allocation rules and the mark standards are how we convert the URSs into TO&Es at the detailed level of requirements. So you don't do that for every URS that you propose. You wait to see if the requirement is approved, then you go ahead and make that adjustment. So when we're doing routine adjustment of TO&Es with the proponents, sometimes those manpower requirements are going to change. Like we may field a new maintenance test equipment through the DAS process, and then as a result of that, the mechanics are more efficient, or we have better repair parts. We don't need as many major assemblies over time to support these better pieces of equipment. So when the mark standards change, then TO&Es and then subsequent MTOs get adjusted. All of that gets managed through the program and is part of the continuous modernization and update to make sure that we are only meeting minimum mission essential wartime requirements, so we don't have extra slack around just because it's nice to have, because we've got a lot of unfunded units that we really need, and we try to allocate resources efficiently and effectively. So that's what we mean by manpower allocation rules, manpower requirements criteria, and that's all part of this continuous modernization process that goes through evolutionary adaptations, but also revolutionary when we're updating FDU. So these force design update recommendations that are coming in, sometimes they're just proposals to tweak or slightly improve an existing TO&E. Sometimes they are for entirely new battlefield capabilities and requirements that we want. So the FDU handles all of that stuff as part of this organizational design process. So thanks for your kind attention, and let's bring our questions to class and just continue to develop our professional depth. Thanks for your kind attention.